Hey, y'all. I am so glad to be at Trading Forward this morning. I have such a sense of just awe and wonder and anticipation. God is doing some mighty things and is going to do some mighty things. I want to say a thank you before we do the next song. We have filling in on keys and some vocals here today helping us, Brian Hatley. Thanks, Brian, for filling in. We appreciate you helping us out, doing an awesome job. The next song that we're going to do, like any worship song, it's dedicated to the glory of God. But we've been working on a special song, looking for the right time, and we wanted to sing it and actually say, hey, Brother Jeff Horton, we're dedicating this song also to you, and it's our prayer. As we pray for you and what God's doing in your life, we are praying that the words of this song will be true. God is faithful. This song that we're going to do is you're going to recognize it. It's kind of like an oldie song. But, you know, I was on the computer doing some research before service today to make sure that I got the right person's name as the writer of it. And Ben E. King and two of his buddies wrote the words of this song, but it was based on a gospel song. And I didn't know that. It was based on a gospel song. And we've just tweaked Benny King's words a little bit and turned it into a gospel song. We're going to do it for you today. Stand by me. You may be seated, and as you're being seated, Brother Jeff Horton is going to be coming and sharing today some testimony of what God's doing in his life. And I look forward just to being able to sit and listen and hear as he shares his testimony. As he comes, hey, let's make him welcome. We love him. We're praying for him. God bless you, Jeff.
Thank you. Make sure you can hear me here. I knew it was going to be hard enough to keep my composure without doing a song like that. Thank you. I'll appreciate y'all's prayer while I give my testimony. I've never given it in front of such a large group. I've written it out, all of it, and I may read a lot of it, because if I don't, I might get to rambling and we'll be here for 2 hours. And I'd probably lose some of y'all's interest in that amount of time. Okay, to start with, there's nothing that I did to deserve the blessings the Lord's given me. He chose me just like He chose every one of y'all. All I did was accept the call, accept Jesus Christ into my life. And my testimony, I just wanted to share with y'all the blessings the Lord's given me and how He's worked in my life, even with me not knowing it a lot of times. This may sound like a resume at times. I hope not. But I wanted to give you from the start to the finish. Jeffrey Allen Horton was the name given to me by my parents July the 24th, 1947. That makes me 64 years old. That way you don't have to do the math. We lived in a little 4-room house with a wood stove that heated 2 of the rooms. Bedrooms weren't allowed to be heated. And it didn't have running water. It was a good house. I had a great childhood. You don't know what you're missing if you don't ever have it. So not having the luxuries didn't mean anything. Well, I think we paid $14 a month rent, which don't seem like much, but it wasn't much of a house either. But what I was fortunate to, I had Christian parents. Without that, I don't know where I'd be today. When I was 10 years old, we moved to a new house my parents had built. It had 4 rooms also, but all the rooms were heated in this one because we had a floor furnace. You know, one of those in the floor that had a grid on it, that if you sit on it, it would burn a grid in your backside. I was a quick learner. 1 grid was enough for me. That was a big year for me because we had a revival at our church. And I felt God tugging at my heart, but I didn't do anything that night. I went home and talked to my dad. He talked to me about what it meant to be a Christian and what it meant to join the church. But he didn't want me to do it during the revival because those preachers keep count, you know. I don't know what that was all about, but the next Sunday after the revival, the first note of the last song, and I was down the aisle. And I wish I could say that I'd lived a strong Christian life ever since then. But those teenage years came along, and I started drifting further away from the Lord. I still attended church some, which was good because I met a beautiful young lady there. I was real interested in her, but she wasn't interested in me. But she was interested in the car I was driving. I had my brother's MGA. And so after church that Sunday night, I took her for a ride. And that turned out good. So I took her for a ride after school the next day. And I've been taking her for a ride ever since. It's been a great trip, though. When I graduated from Rowan Tech, moved to Virginia to design ships for the Navy at Newport News Shipyard, I kept the road fairly hot on weekends coming home to see Meredith. All this time I was drifting further away from the Lord. And what was bad about it, I was influencing Meredith's relationship with the Lord too. We were married June the 6th, 1970, made our home in Yorktown, Virginia, where I still work for the shipyard. One Friday evening, our Christian friends, we had one set of friends that were Christian, called and said that they had found a house in their neighborhood a block from their house that was for sale, and they thought we'd be interested. I said, well, we'll check into it. They said, oh, we've already made you an appointment with the realtor. You got to be there in 20 minutes. So we hustled and went there, and we didn't have any money. We had worked paying off all our bills, so we were broke. But the house was a good deal, so we made a deal with the realtor that we would give him $75 to hold it. We'd write him a check if he'd hold it. This was on a Friday. If he'd hold it till the next Thursday when I got paid, which he did. We managed to scrounge up a down payment, and we bought the house. That was a blessing there. The Lord was blessing me, and I didn't even realize it. I had no idea what was going on. But all this time, I was drifting further away from the Lord and still influencing Meredith's relationship. The Lord had it all worked out for us, and I was oblivious to a lot of the stuff that was going on. Although we attended church some, and we even had a Sunday school party at our house. And one couple came in that night at the party, and they said they'd tried to buy that house, but somebody had beat them to it. That would have been us. Well, about a year later, I'd been with the shipyard 6 years, and we decided to move. And we called that couple up, and they bought the house. That was a blessing there. All this time, the Lord's blessing me, even though I am not sold out to Him. He had plans for me that I didn't even know about. Well, we moved to Greenville, South Carolina, where both Misty and Starla were born. That's 2 big blessings. I didn't expect this to happen this early. I tried my hand at commercial building design with Daniel Engineers J. String Company. After a while, Meredith made a change in her life and started going to Sunday schools, to Bible studies, and we found a good church. I kept an eye on her and watched her grow. Once I realized it was real in her life and I was being left behind, I rededicated my life to Christ. So if your spouse is watching you, they are watching you, so watch what you do. Live a good Christian life. The growing began then, not all at once though, but I did start to see how the Lord was blessing, and I started testifying about it. And we even started tithing. That was a big step. One of the things that happened there, a lot of times you tithe and you expect something in return, like a pay raise. I thought that was good. Of course, that's the wrong attitude to have. But I didn't see that. I saw that we had bought a house that had an unfinished yard, and I had got the yard sowed, and I built some flower beds out of free railroad ties from the railroad. That was a blessing. But I didn't have the shrubs to put in there. And I had pictured these low-growing juniper shrubs. Well, I'm sitting at work one day, and a guy's looking at the window. I asked him what he was looking at. He said, "We don't have enough parking. We're going to tear out all the shrubbery beds." And I said, "What are you going to do with all those low-growing juniper shrubs?" He said, "You can have them. You got to get them this weekend." So I had a friend with a trailer, and we loaded them up. So I got all the shrubs for free. The Lord blessed us there. While we lived in Greenville, Meredith's parents lived close by, and her father had a problem with alcohol. I didn't, because I could quit any time. He couldn't. We spent a lot of time at AA meetings with him, and that's when I realized that I was no different than the people in those meetings. That was another blessing that I realized it. I had thought of the example I was setting for my daughters, and about the same time a neighbor came and visited. And he sat down and explained to me that it really wasn't my drinking that was the problem. It was my attitude and my relationship, my priorities with God. And he was right. God was not my first priority. Not even close. And God should be your first priority, and then your spouse, your family, your job, and your church. Preacher might argue with that job and church thing, but you're no good to the church if you don't have a job. So that's another sermon. I made a big change in my life then, and my witness improved too. I guess the Lord was through with us there, because through a turn of events that we visited, took a vacation to Florida, the economy dropped, and I visited a friend there. I took a job with Jacksonville, Florida, in another ship design company. I was back in ship design. I enjoyed that. I was working with a lot of the same people I'd worked with in Virginia, and they knew the old Jeff, but he sounded and talked different. So I had a lot of tests there, but it gave me a lot of opportunities to testify what the Lord had done for me. The blessings continued. I had a friend that worked there just when I moved. He was moving out of town, and he let us rent his house at a real good price until we could close on our house in South Carolina, which we had sold, or had rented to a couple that had their house sold and couldn't close on until they closed on theirs. A little complicated thing there. But everything went smooth, and then when it was all through, he let us have the house at a very fair price. Another blessing. Something new happened to me there. I was a country boy that had never ridden any public transportation a bus or train, nothing like that. Well, I went to work for this company, and I had to fly everywhere the Navy had ships. So I'd have to fly there, rent a car, or ride a taxi or a train or something. So I got to see all different places up and down the East Coast and the West Coast, even Scotland and England. And that was a blessing that I got to travel at the Navy's expense. Our time in Charleston, got ahead of myself there. By the time we found a good church, excuse me, my company offered me a position in our office in Charleston, South Carolina. So we sold our house, another blessing, to a friend, and off to South Carolina we went. This was probably the hardest move for Meredith because she really liked Florida. But we found a house there, the real deal, another blessing. Our time in Charleston was tough, though, because the work in the office wasn't real strong. But our blessings there was we met some real close friends in our church there, and we got to do Evangelism Explosion, which is a witnessing program by Dr. James Kennedy from Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. And it's a real life-changing experience to study that. Well, we lasted 1 year, 4 months, and 2 days in Charleston and escaped back to Florida. It took 1 day to sell our house in Charleston and 1 day to find and buy our house in Florida. That was 2 blessings there. We went back to our old church, and it was there I studied the book, My Heart, Christ Home. It's a little bitty book, but it has a lot to say. And sometimes you know life, and it takes a special event for them to become real. I knew Christ was alive in my heart, but I had not accepted He's there every day, every minute, every second, waiting to have quality time with you. And I wasn't taking the opportunity to have quality time with Him. So this was a big change in my attitude. We left that church later to start a new church, which we found out was a lot of work. It was rewarding work, though. We got to see the Lord at work through circumstances that people couldn't believe. Within 3 years, we had bought 60 acres of land and were starting a new church building, which was unheard of when you start a new church. With a lot of prayer, though, we had decided to move back to North Carolina where I could be near my parents and start a business for myself. We knew we were supposed to move, but our house wouldn't sell. We had the house for sale so long that the termites ate the post off on the for sale sign and it fell over. Now, termites were bad in Florida, though. But after a year, our house did sell, and we moved. And we had bought a house one weekend when we were visiting in Granite Quarry, so we just moved right in. We went back to the church where we were married, and we taught Sunday school there. Sunday school is something we'd been teaching ever since Greenville when I'd rededicated my life. We got involved with experiencing God. That's another good study to do. I've done it 5 times now, and I learned something every time I do it. One of the things there that I learned was, one of the chapters was about things happen for a reason. So I started looking at everything that happened in my life through the week, what the reason was. Well, I had a diesel Blazer, and every time I tried to start it, the starter would make a funny noise. I thought, wonder what that is. Well, one time it wouldn't start, so I had to have it towed in. They explained, no, nothing to it. It has a short bolt and a long bolt in the starter, and that long one always twists off. So they were ready for me when we got to the shop. But when they took the starter off, the short bolt had twisted off, which they said was real odd. But they fixed it, and I was on my way. And all I could figure out from that was Jimmy Sifford service station needed money, and the Lord had chosen me to give it to them. It wasn't until the next week that Misty was going to go back to college to pick up her goods because she had finished with college and was going to move back home, that I went out and started our van, which had the same motor in it. It made that same noise. Well, I knew what the noise was then because the Lord had taught me the week before. So I drove it up to the service station, and it was the long bolt that twisted off, and they happened to have the long bolt laying there. Put it in 15 minutes, I was back home. So that was a blessing, and it took me a week to see it, though. And sometimes His blessings are that way. We do things, and it'll be a while before we see the outcome of it. Well, I'd moved here to build houses, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I took a job with Grove Construction to learn, and after 6 months, I got my general contractor's license and went out on my own. The more I gave the Lord credit for what I was doing, the more He blessed me. I never had to advertise. Jobs just came to me. The Lord just blessed over and over. We went back to Florida for a visit one weekend, and I was sharing with a preacher about how my business was going and how all my employees were Christians. And he said, if all your employees were Christians, who are you witnessing to? Well, that kind of cut. I thought, that is true. Who am I witnessing to? So when I got back, I started witnessing to all the subcontractors. I'd wear Christian logo T-shirts, and I even kept boxes of T-shirts in my truck to sell if I got any interest up. Sold a bunch of T-shirts, too. But this really changed the talk on the trash talk on the job. The guys knew where I stood, so you didn't hear that talk a lot. And that was nice. And I got to see a lot of tough guys make a change in their life. One of them even became a preacher. We moved to the lake a few years ago, and Trading Ford was the closest church to us that we could get involved with. And Misty had already introduced me to Trading Ford because I'd been on a youth mission trip to Charleston, South Carolina with them one time. That was a big blessing to get to do that. We moved here, and I've never regretted it. Y'all, this is home to me. It's a blessing. Now this when it gets tough. We went through the economy drop well because I was in a place in my business where being at the right place at the right time. That was a blessing, and I didn't know it because it was business as usual in my mind, but the Lord had a different plan. Through that, I got to take care of my dad the last year of his life. That's a big blessing. Pause a minute. Meredith and I had planned to retire and live on the boat for a while, but just as I got started making plans, the Lord had another plan. In August of last year, I got sick on a trip to Cuba. We had a mission trip there, which was real good. But I got sick one day. Well, when I got back, I went to the doctor, and I was still having some problems. And since I just had a physical, he figured it had to be something I'd picked up in Cuba. He ran tests, and there were no parasites or anything else. And I continued to get sicker. In September, I found that I had pancreatic cancer. It had spread to my liver and to my pleural cavity. I started taking treatment in October, and treatment has worked fairly well. It gets harder now. And I know y'all don't know what to say to me. I had a friend with cancer years ago, Terry Jones. He told me that people didn't know what to say to him and didn't know how to talk about it. But he said, ask me anything. And I feel the same way. I'll say anything. I'll talk about it. I might even tell you more than you want to know. But and I know a lot of people have said that I look good. And I like that because I never got told that before. So there's some advantages in being sick. I've been asked how long I'll be taking treatments. And I guess that's as long as I can. Because my diagnosis without the Lord's intervention is terminal. They gave me 6 months to a year last September. So I've reached my 6 months, so I feel pretty good. How does this change my attitude toward God and life? Well, I'd planned on about 30 more years because both my parents lived a long time. I thought, well, I will too. But the Lord has blessed me so much in my 64 years, I can't complain. Not at all. So He's continuing to bless, and I'm going to continue to testify. And it's given me an opportunity to get with some old friends I had that I wasn't a good witness to then, and to talk to them about their eternal security, and that's been great. I do appreciate all the cards and letters and food that people have given. It just tells me I'm not in this alone. I thank you. Praise God.